When it comes to building wealth, it is a long-term process. Now, there's a multitude of steps, and that's what we're going to be looking at in today's video. And of course, if you have your own questions, go ahead and drop them in chat. But when you start looking at building wealth, there are a few simplified steps that, again, we're going to be going over, starting with the first one, which is making a plan. Now, when it comes to wealth creation and when it comes to wealth in general, this is going to be very, very specific, and it is going to be very different for a lot of individuals. For a lot of people, building wealth is spending time with their family. It might be having $1 million in the bank. It might be being comfortable in retirement. For some people, it could be having an absorbent amount of money, being able to travel the world. For some, it could even be setting up generational wealth, meaning that your kids and your grandkids are not going to have to worry about money at all during their entire life, which of course, generational wealth is what I am planning on doing and what I want to do. Now, of course, when we start with the first step in this, it is making a plan. When you start building on this, the more specific that your plan can be, because you're going to identify goals and come up with a plan to accomplish them. This can have a multi kind of pronged approach, but you can have some goals that include, I want to retire by the time I'm 50. I want to send my kids to school for education. I want to go on a vacation, to Italy that we've always wanted to do. There can be a ton of different things as long as you're setting goals and really putting timeframes in place and also putting how are you going to get there. For instance, if I say I want to retire by the time I'm 50, let's say, okay, well, by the time I'm 50, I want to have all of my debt paid. I don't want to have auto loans. I want my mortgage to be paid off. And I want to have $1 million in investment accounts so I can actually take 5% out of that every year, supplementing Social Security when I get it at 65, meaning I'm going to have to bridge the gap for a multitude of years until we get to that point. But again, if you identify a plan, if you put things around it, you can make sure that it is done. Now, of course, when you look at things that create passive income is really a big, big part of this. When you look at YouTube that we're doing right here, my channel is now monetized. Thank you guys for all of the viewers and everyone who checks out the channel. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. We do financial education and literacy here. And of course, when we talk about the multiple approach to passive income, it could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be CDs. You could have interest, you could have dividends. You could be looking at REITs, you could do investment property, you could start your own business. Now, when you start looking bigger picture, when you start looking at the investment side, over 90% of millionaires were made from investing. And like we said earlier, investing is a very slow, monotonous process. I have my 3-fund portfolio that I put money into every single paycheck, which of course, we know it started at 10 grand, went over 100 grand. Now it is well north of $100,000. Even though we haven't put as much into it lately, it is still growing at an exponential rate. Over the last 3 years, we have seen a 72% return over the last 3 years. Now, that is due to dollar cost averaging. And of course, my personal plan is to retire at the age of 50, which means I have 6 more years to get everything in line. And for my 50th birthday, I plan on paying off my mortgage in the entirety. So paying it down for the next 6 years because I want to take those funds. I want to invest those funds versus going ahead and putting it on the mortgage. And the reason for that, and this is a video that we're going to actually be doing in the next day or two, is because my current mortgage is at a 30-year mortgage, it is at 2.5%, which means if I'm making, 10% in the S&P 500, my mortgage is sitting at 2.5%. Even with inflation, I am still well over net positive, making sure that we have enough in there. And we also do have that investment account that is growing much faster than I'm actually paying down the mortgage. Now, of course, with that being said, the regular mortgage payments that we make are driving down the balance on the mortgage because we have paid we're about 10 years into our mortgage. We've already paid about 60% of it off. So we did, and we have been kind of putting a little bit extra on there to make sure that we pay it off. Now, of course, when it comes to investing, do your research. When it comes to making this plan, you have to follow a couple different things. And when you do the plan, make sure if you're investing in the 401k plans, you know what you're invested into. You know exactly where your money is. You know the performance of the investment. Now, a lot of people will hire financial advisors or people to do this for them. And a lot of people, including 401k providers, will have individuals that are literally dedicated to your 401k plan. Make sure you know where your money is, guys. Make sure you look at your investment portfolio. You know where your money is going. And you know what? This is a great time to educate yourself, making sure, again, that you know exactly how the money is getting into, how much you're putting in there, where exactly it's being invested. And again, making sure you know that your money is working for you. Second one, create and stick to a budget. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this. Some people call it the spending plan. Some people call it the budget. Regardless of what it is, you want to know where your money's going. There are so many people that I do financial counseling with that have no clue. They get paid X amount of dollars. They pay whatever bills they have to, whatever comes in the mail. They're buying things, sometimes living outside of their means. And ultimately, they get to the end of the month and they have to borrow money, whether for groceries, for utilities, whatever it is. But they are really not budgeting any of their money, meaning by the end of the month, they are completely over and they've spent more than they've actually made, meaning that they're using debt to consolidate or debt to essentially supplement what they're not making in income, which is kind of crazy. Now, like we said earlier, majority of people don't like sticking to the budget, but it is a very, very big fundamental step when it comes to creating wealth, even if you take the basics. Now, what we mean by the basics is when you look at all of the need categories that are kind of set, when you look at, let's say, your cell phone bill, your internet bill, your rent, your auto loan payment, if you have any secured debt or unsecured debt, whatever is kind of fixed rate, fixed term, those are ones that are very, very easy. Once you make a budget, and once you do this once or twice, it does make it very easy because a lot of those fixed expenses are going to be the exact same month in, month out. And of course, when you start looking at the variable expenses, even taking a quick snapshot, you can get a view of where you can cut money, where you can save money. And of course, when you look at, like I said, housing and auto, loans, groceries, but discretionary funding and discretionary items are where you have the ability to really move those levers. We've talked about this before. When it comes to, let's say, eating out, entertainment, travel, even expenditures, even looking at impulse purchases when you go to a grocery store, even if you cut down, let's say 10 or 20% on those, even if you're not removing it entirely, you're going to have the ability to have more money to debt repayment. You're also going to have more money to go ahead and put in that emergency fund and also in those investment accounts, which of course is going to greatly increase the ability to hit the financial goals that we made in that first step. Now, of course, two very popular methods is the 50-30-20 rule or the 70-20-10 rule. And then, of course, my personal favorite, what I do zero-based budgeting. What that means is I get paid X amount of dollars. I pay all of my bills. Whatever is left is allocated to another bucket. Now, with that third bucket, or what is essentially that I have left because I am living well within my means, that last bucket is what I use to invest in its entirety, which is the reason and the methodology how I have built up those investment accounts so fast. Now, of course, we're doing contributions into the 401k. We're putting money into our HSA accounts. We're putting money into a taxable brokerage account because unfortunately we can't do the IRAs. We could do the backdoor IRAs and a couple other things, but overall we are saving probably about 20% of our income in its entirety that is going into investing. And of course, when you start combining that over the last decade, and of course, looking at the next 6 years before retirement, we are going to have 16 years where we're putting 20+% of our income, every single paycheck, that is going into investment accounts. Now, I know a majority of people can't do that, but even if you start off simple, even if you start with $10, $20, whatever it is, guys, as long as you start the ball kind of rolling, you start that snowball in the investment and really looking at how fast the balances can increase when you start putting money away. When we get into number 3, it is the management of debt. The way that I view this, and this was actually probably about 10 years ago now, which changed, and I work in a financial institution and I have for 17 years now, but managing debt has become an absolute vital part. And I view debt entirely different than I did in my 20s and 30s. The debt and the structure of debt, because not all debt is created equal. We have some that, of course, is very, very bad debt. This is credit card debt. This is unsecured loan debt. This is where you see the exponential interest rates. When we look at average credit cards, they're running about 25% interest rate now, which means that you are paying 25% interest on a credit card if you're carrying a balance. And of course, the way that I view debt is every single dollar that we're paying in interest is a dollar that you cannot spend anywhere else. It is really the opportunity cost where if I can manage my debt, if I can get my debt load down, if I can get the payment down, if I can get the interest that I'm paying down, that is going to free up a lot more cash flow. That is going to give me the ability and the power to invest in a bunch of different accounts. Now, of course, there can be good debt. Now, good debt comes with kind of the quotation marks that we put around good debt. When you look at a mortgage, when you look at an auto loan, when you look at a couple things that are lower interest rates, and really that are needs more than wants. Now, of course, I do put this in quotation marks. And when we do talk about the good debt, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. And I do, because people view good debt, and there is good debt, and then there's kind of the double-edged sword of both of them. Now, what I mean by that is when you start looking at having a car, you can buy a brand new car for about 30K, no bells, no whistles, very basic, very economic car that is going to get you from point A to point B. Of course, let's say that is good debt, because of course you need a car, you need a reliable car. Even if you're buying a used car, could definitely be well worth it. Now, of course, there is the individuals out there that are buying the $120,000 SUV. In my opinion, that is not good debt. That is just kind of the over absorbent amount of debt that you're getting. When I start seeing, car payments that are in the $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 range, it gets kind of crazy with debt, because again, I know it's nice to have those vehicles, and we buy used vehicles personally because it gives us the ability. And again, going back to the investment piece, we have a lot more money to invest because both of our vehicles are paid off. We paid them off with about a year and a half. I believe we paid off our vehicles. We don't carry any credit card debt. We don't carry any personal debt. Only thing we have is the mortgage, which again, in 6 years, we're going to pay it off in the entirety. And of course, we don't want any debt at all, because it is absolutely killing you. When you start looking at student loans, when you start looking at personal loans, when you look at credit cards, then you put on a mortgage in there, then you throw on, a car payment, the amount of interest that you're paying in a 30-day period, if you go ahead and add it up, for majority of Americans, is pretty disgusting to see that you're paying literally hundreds of dollars, where if you're an individual, let's say you're making $20, $25, $30 an hour, you're paying $300, $400, $500 a month in interest for everything that you have. And most of it is stuff that you bought before, especially if you're carrying those heavy credit card debt loads. And with that, you're paying and giving away the money that you're earning from your paycheck every single time. This is, again, where my real view changed when it came to debt, and when it comes to carrying debt, is, again, how many hours do I have to work to pay the debt that is owed, just in interest for a 30-day period? Honestly, take it under consideration. Break it out for 1 month, even looking when you're building out your budget. Break it out for 1 month. Let me know in the comments down below what you're carrying, how much of your time and effort and work day is eaten up by the interest that you do carry. Now, of course, there's two ways to eliminate this, and it is the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. We have talked about both of these quite a bit. When it comes to the debt snowball, it is going from the absolute lowest balance that you have all the way down to the highest balance. Now, this is the psychological factor. When you start eliminating some of those smaller cards, let's say you got a card with $50 on it, you have another card with $100. When you start systematically knocking out that debt, your psychological brain, you can think about it and you are eliminating debt. Now, the mathematically or the logic side is the debt avalanche. That lists your debt from the absolute highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate, so you can systematically make more dollar for dollar when you're doing the avalanche method. But again, you don't see the instant results. For instance, if we have a credit card, let's say that has a $10,000 balance, but it's at 35% interest, every dollar you put towards that is going to be an incredible amount of money that you're saving, but it's going to take you a lot of time to knock out that $10,000, especially if you're putting, a couple hundred extra dollars on it every single month. You're talking months, if not years, to knock out that debt, depending if you use it or not. And overall, that's where a lot of people can get discouraged. That's where a lot of people can get kind of frustrated, because they're not seeing the balance come down as fast as they want to. Now, of course, when you start looking at people that are really bought into this and really getting into the debt elimination plan, a lot of individuals will literally chop up the cards, never using it again, not getting in debt again. And just like fire, I know Dave Ramsey talks about this, really getting and putting every single penny that you can save, scrimping. We talk about beans and rice, not literally beans and rice. And I know some people question that, but overall, just putting whatever you can, every extra dollar that you have, putting it right towards that debt to eliminate it. And then, of course, the trick is not accumulating more debt. That is where a lot of people kind of get stuck. I see some big consolidations. Within usually 3 to 5 years, I see those same individuals doing consolidation again. And then, of course, the cycle, 3 to 5 years, we see more consolidation. And it's because the spending has never changed. The debt cycle will continue forever. They're living outside of their means. They're supplementing income with credit card debt, and they are carrying this forever, which unfortunately is what we see a majority of Americans do. Now, as we get into number 4, which is one of my absolute priorities, is building the emergency fund. Now, for this, I do really fall in the same realm as we have with Dave Ramsey, saving up that $1,000. Now, essentially, the first baby step that he has in his 7 baby steps, the first one is saving $1,000. Now, this is because that $1,000, even though it is not a true emergency fund, that first $1,000 is going to be your cushion. It is going to prove to yourself that you have the ability to save money, that you have the ability to set aside money. And again, when it comes to the psychological aspect, when it comes to the financial security aspect, a majority of smaller purchases are going to be able to be covered with that emergency fund, starter emergency fund, baby emergency fund, whatever you want to call it. It is going to be the psychological starter to building it up. Everything over that $1,000 is going to go into the debt elimination. Now, of course, the variation that I do have that I really recommend is doing a 401k match. Now, this, of course, even while you're doing the emergency fund, even while you're doing paying off your debt, putting money into the match. Because of the match, you're getting a 100% return. If your company is offering a 4% match, do the 4% match. That means you're living on the remaining 96% of your salary at the very, very bare minimum, building out that emergency fund, that first $1,000. Then, of course, attacking and really eliminating that debt like your life depends on it. Getting rid of it as soon as possible will literally be a game changer for the rest of your life. Now, of course, once you eliminate that debt, you'll notice very, very fast, just like I did, once the debt is gone, you have a lot of money, and you have a lot of money that is kind of discretionary spending. That is the reason why at that point, so once I went ahead and I paid off all of my debt, built up that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months. Then from there, it was fire to invest. Again, mortgage somewhere down the road, we'll pay it off. I'm not too worried about it. But when it came to having that emergency fund built, and of course, not having any debt, this gave me my really, really strong purpose in investing like we do. And again, knocking out and eliminating all of that debt. Once the investment account gets to a certain point in the next 6 years, I know I'm going to have more than enough in there just to knock out the mortgage. That will be paid off, meaning at 50 years of age, we will have zero debt and we will have north of $1 million in there. Then, of course, you throw in having a free and cleared paid off house. You're talking almost $2 million in net worth, which is awesome. And essentially, with all of the side hustle, the side income, YouTube, everything else, being able to supplement my income because we don't have the debt that a majority of people carry. Now, looking at number 5, maxing out that retirement savings. If you want to talk about building wealth, which is exactly what we're doing, maxing out the retirement savings is your priority. When I think of the 401k, now I have a Roth 401k. My wife has the same. It is a Roth 401k. We are both putting 15% into that 401k. And that does not include everything we're putting into brokerage accounts. That does not include everything we're putting into HSAs, what we're putting into the MESP programs for our kids. That is just the straight up Roth 401ks that we have. And of course, for me and my wife, company matches are just the icing on the cake. When we're putting away an exorbitant amount of money into the 401ks, then of course, when it comes to the health side, those HSAs we're maxing out every single year. Then of course, the student accounts, we're building them up for our kids, as well as the brokerage account, which is of course going to be the money that we're relying on between the ages of 50 and 65 till we get to that Social Security march. And of course, with it being in the Roth, if there is something that we need once we hit that 59 and a half age, if we need money out of the Roth, we can still have it. But that is the reason why we do have traditional money, Roth money, and we have a lot of money in brokerage accounts, which we have access to if we do need it for any reason. Now, looking at number 6, now this is the automation of the finances. This is the easiest way. With technology, with apps, with everything that we have, you can build wealth and you can automate all of your investments like we talked about in the beginning. When it comes to a strategy, when it comes to how are you going to retire, how are you going to take that trip, how are you going to be done working, how are you going to pay for college, everything, it is about automation. So when I think of contributions to 401ks, it is automated. When it comes to HSA, it is automated. When it comes to our MESP program, again, it is automated. Everything is literally set on automation. And of course, with all that automation, I don't even see the money come into my account. So I don't have the ability, I don't really have the know-how or the ability to spend the money that's coming in. All of it comes straight out of an account. All of it goes into different accounts. That way I know that the money is always going to be there for the investments. Now, of course, you can also set up payments for credit card bills. You can do student loans. You can do mortgage. You can do rent. You can do your car. You can do everything. And a majority of places will give you a pretty good discount if you do set it up on automatic payments. I know a lot of financial institutions will give you like a 0.25% off your loan if you set up on automatic payments. And of course, the big thing with automating your finances is you do not want to miss anything. Absolutely will be totally detrimental if you're late on any of your payments. You're going to tank your credit score. I see this all the time where, hey, I have an auto loan. I was late once or twice. My score went from a 750 down to a 680 because I was late once or twice. You do not want to do that. I know credit scores are important. A lot of people are really set. And I know, again, thinking of George Kamel and a couple other ones, that you don't need a credit score as much as you don't want to believe it. But it is nice to have a credit score. Credit score means that you're carrying debt of some form. Now, for me personally, we do use credit cards. We pay them off every 2 weeks. We don't even wait the entire month for that to come due, but every 2 weeks we are paying off our credit cards in their entirety. Student loans we don't have. And then, of course, a lot of the other debt we do not carry at all, meaning we have eliminated literally everything. Now, when we get into number 7, one of the easiest ways to not only repay debt, but have money to invest is to increase your earnings. When you start looking at saving money, when you start thinking of finances, the more money you earn, the more money that you have to spend, the more money you have for wealth creation, and the more money you have for debt repayment, which of course means that you're going to be creating future wealth for yourself, which is huge. Now, of course, this money has to be invested in some place. This is really, again, something that I realized later in life. When it comes to having money, when it comes to keeping money in a financial institution, chances are, because of inflation, everything is getting more expensive. We see consumer price index is increasing. Prices have been increasing. Now, if you're not earning more than what inflation is, if you're keeping money in financial institutions that are paying a 0.03, a 0.01, you are actually losing money by saving the money in there. The big thing that I know and the big thing that I've really learned is money sitting in the bank. I mean, emergency fund, granted, yes, should have the emergency fund, and that emergency fund should be in a high yield savings account. Even down below, we have a link for M1 Finance. It offers a 5% return on liquid savings account, which is awesome. But again, that is where your money needs to be at when you look at the emergency fund. The rest of it is debt repayment or it is investing. That's it, period. That is where it needs to be. That is where money is going to grow. That is where the wealth creation is going to come from. Now, of course, you're going to have your working cash. You're going to have your money in your checking, maybe a little bit in savings if you're saving for a vacation, whatever it may be. But ultimately, you don't want to lose money and you don't want your money to get eaten up from inflation. And of course, to increase your hustle, 54% of Americans have a side hustle. They're doing something like this on YouTube. They're doing, honestly, it's crazy, from trash pickup to everything that we see with the side hustle. There are so many different things that people are doing that are being incredibly intuitive and incredibly, creating a whole entire lifestyle for themselves on these side hustles, where even if the primary job goes away, the side hustle can support you in your entirety, or at least support you until you do find another place. Now, of course, we don't want to be using money to just supplement the income and using this extra money for the lifestyle and for the lifestyle creep. Now, what I see is a lot of people will have a primary job. They'll pick up a side hustle where they're making, a little bit, a couple days a week. That extra money is just literally going into the pot because they're not budgeting properly, because they don't have that spending plan, because they don't have the ability to make sure that they're living within inside their means. They are bringing in the side hustle. Now, the thing with the side hustle is, for a majority of people, there's not a retirement plan. There's no benefits when you're doing YouTube. You don't have a 401k plan. There's so many things that are kind of lacking with the side hustle that a lot of people have to know and understand when you're getting into it, especially if there's a point where you can't do the side hustle anymore, but now you're reliant on the income that it's producing. Then you could be in a big world of trouble because you're reliant on the money to essentially pay all of your bills and supplement your income, again, because you're not budgeting properly. And the last one we look at, number 8 of the 8 steps to really build wealth, is diversification. This is one of the biggest reasons why I invest in ETFs. If you've caught any of the investing videos, I invest exclusively in ETFs. With the majority of ETFs, unless they are very specific sector ETFs, they are built by diversification and they are diversified by their nature. When you start looking at, let's say, the VOO, which is the S&P 500, you're investing in the 500 largest companies in the United States. And of those companies, when you start looking at market cap, that covers 80% of the entire market is just the S&P 500. So that is a huge chunk. Now, of course, in there, when you look again at the diversification, you are covering every industry, you are covering every sector. Of course, it's going to be in different weights depending on how you're buying it. But when you start combining this, something like the VOO with something that's on the growth side, like the VUG or even the QQQM, then of course in the 3-stock portfolio, we bring in the dividends. So when we start looking at the income generation, like a JEPI or an SCHD, it really rounds out a perfect 3-fund portfolio. And really the diversification is there across a multitude of companies. And you do have a very different weight in all of these companies. And of course, this can vary by age, where if you're younger generation, let's say 20s and 30s, you want to be heavy into growth ETFs. And again, when you start looking at a lot of these growth ETFs, it is going to be the place where you might have 40 years, 40, 50 years until you're ready for retirement. That is the time you want your money to exponentially grow. And that is the time that you are going to build wealth. And of course, the earlier that you can put money into these ETFs, the earlier that you can invest money, which of course, for the Gen Zers, they are investing at 19. When you start looking at millennials, they were around 25. Even looking further back at the baby boomers started investing around 35 years of age, which means right now for the wealth creation, looking at the Gen Zers, which are investing at 19, they are now the youngest generation ever in history to start investing. And of course, big thing for that is because of M1 Finance, because of Robinhood, because of Moomoo, because of Webull. The technology aspect has really built in the ability to simplify investing. And of course, when it comes to investing in a majority of these platforms, you don't need thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. You literally need, some of them are like 25 bucks. If you got 25 bucks, you can invest it into ETFs, you can invest it into stocks. And of course, it can really grow from there with regular contributions. Now, of course, the bottom line in this, there are some really, really good steps out there to build wealth. If it's done properly, it is super rewarding if you really follow it. And again, some of the big ones, make sure you're investing, make sure you're not taking on debt. Step by step, you can systematically really break it down. When it comes to the individual, now when it comes to you and I, it is about, as much as I like the steps, we cover it, we cover stocks, we cover bonds, we cover investing. Everything here you have to take kind of with a grain of salt because it is up to you and it is really the accountability piece. I cannot stress this enough. When it comes to everything, I provide you the tools that you need to build wealth. I provide you with the means. It is up to you systematically what you want to do. If you're an individual that wants to try to cut, going out to eat, maybe packing your lunches, maybe save 50 bucks here, save $100 here, you can make a really life-changing event. And of course, it snowballs. Once you start seeing the debt being eliminated, it snowballs. Once you start seeing the balance and investment accounts start increasing, it snowballs. It is really catching almost like a cold, that when you start seeing progression within your life, when you start seeing advancement, when you start seeing you can do this, it is really the game changer literally for the rest of your life. And that's exactly what it took me until mid-30s to really realize was I am in control of my own destiny. I do create my own fate. The more that an effort that I put into it, the better that I do succeed. And of course, it is really just exponentially grown from there. Through the financial counseling program, and that I am a certified financial counselor, I really took the time and effort to build a lot of relationships with a lot of individuals. I've helped them go from a 580 credit score to a 750 credit score, buying their first home, refinancing everything, getting everything and eliminating 100% of their debt, doing the debt-free journey, which of course, the debt-free journey is right back here on the wall from Displate. It is something that I love to do. It is something that I have embraced for a multitude of years now. And I do like helping individuals when it comes to the financial education and the financial counseling piece. So if you do have questions, drop them down below. Thank you guys for joining us for the live stream. It is awesome to be able to come on here and share this with you guys. And of course, setting aside the time. But those are 8 steps you need to build wealth. And again, you have to take them to heart. Even if you have to watch it a couple times, you have to go over them, you have to view them, write down and start a plan tonight. It is really the challenge that I want to leave with you guys is if you're starting the steps, if you're coming up with a plan, make them big. Make the goals so big that you know it is going to be challenging. You know it is going to be difficult to achieve that goal. Don't make it easy where, hey, I want to save $500 by the end of the year. Some people, it could be incredibly challenging. For some people, it could be absolutely nothing that you could do it with some really dedicated effort in a week or two, depending on what you do. But again, guys, that is going to do it for our stream. Thank you guys for joining me and have a good night.